What's up, people? I'm Shaggy the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Neil Young's studio catalog. Today we got studio release number 29, 2006's Living with War. I'm not going to play any music from it, but I am going to talk about it, review it, rank it among the other ones I've already done. And yeah, that's what's happening here. I've been going through the entire catalog, starting with the first release, dropping in live albums and other things as we go. So here is where we are. Living with War. An album that is very much of a particular moment, a particular place, a particular time. The United States, 2006, under George Bush, in the wake of 9/11 and the Iraq War. That's what this album is about. 10 songs, number of them are very, very specific to this time in history. We get references to Al-Qaeda, we get references to Mission Accomplished, we get references to the bugles that automatically played taps. We get references in 2006 to predicting that Obama might be the savior that the United States needs. We get the hope that maybe it's a woman. This country is still, unfortunately, not at that place. We get, you could say that this is a political album, and Neil was accused of that when it was released. The right wing particularly absolutely hated this album. There is a song called Let's Impeach the President. But Neil, in his defense, would usually say something like, this is not political, this is about George Bush, and if you were a party and George Bush was in your party, you would be much better off without him. So, like, it's not political, it's human. And I've always loved this album. And every time I go back and listen to it, I'm kind of surprised at how much I still love it, because a part of me is thinking, oh, the only reason I like it is because politically, despite it not being a political album, but sort of ethically and morally and spiritually and worldview outlookly on life, it is very much aligned with like my values as a human. And I feel like Neil taps into the hippie side of him a lot. There's a reference to the hippie highway on here. He references Dylan back in 1963 and sort of that early Dylan-esque folk movement and how that played out. And Neil taps into those Woodstock values, those Summer of Love values, in a very sort of, can't we all just live in peace and not kill people and get along type vibe. So I've always lyrically just connected with this album. And so whenever I've thought about it, I've always thought to myself, well, it's just kind of this almost gimmicky type thing that's a instant reaction to what's happening at the time. But then you go back and listen to it, or I go back and listen to it, I'm like, oh, despite having some of the stuff obviously like in concrete in 2006, it still really works. Musically, apparently the entire thing was conceived, written, performed, released in like a week and a half. Neil was watching the news or saw a newspaper clipping, I think, saw like a front page of a newspaper, got inspired to write a bunch of songs, went into the studio with two musicians at first, a bass player named Rick Rosas, a drummer named Chad Cromwell. They knocked out this material. A trumpet was added at some point. A choir came in and added some choir-esque elements. One song is completely sung by a choir, The Closing America the Beautiful. And just kind of knocked it out, dropped it on his website, released it, got inspired and did it. Wasted no time. Almost like the Ohio template. Something happens in Ohio, 4 dead, we record a song, we get it out there. Musically, it is a very interesting sort of between, it's the raw rock Neil. It's that Crazy Horse sound, but not without Crazy Horse. And musically, it falls somewhere between Crazy Horse's sort of more Tyrannosaurus Rexian type, grungy, heavy guitar drenched stomp, and Pearl Jam's more fleet-footed, still menacing sort of velociraptorian type stomp, or not even a stomp, more of like a climbing all over the place, just grungy dance. And it's somewhere kind of between those two. There are mirror ball elements. I think a couple of the better tracks on here specifically remind me of 2 of the better tracks on Mirrorball. They have that just sort of that just kind of rock grungy, but a little more light-footed, fleet-footed than a Crazy Horse groove ever is. But there is just some great guitar playing, but it's ragged, it's rough. I read a review of this in which they compared it to Ragged Glory, and I think musically you could describe this as ragged, and because it's very much dealing with the United States and its history, and there is even a straight up reference to the Star Spangled Banner in some of the lyrics. There is this ragged glory to just the energy of the album, and the fact that he's doing this in a country where, you know, free speech used to actually be free speech here. He was able to do this. He was able to put out an album that criticized the country he lived in, and people could either celebrate it or criticize it, but he was able to do it. It was a fantastic thing. Who knows what would happen these days if he did the similar thing. It would be interesting if he did do a similar thing, especially under the current administration we are in. But anyways, yeah, there's a lot to talk about this album on like a sort of political moment spectrum. It is folk music of the purest form, not sonically, but just the idea of an immediate protest about what you see in the country. So yeah, if you don't like this kind of thing in your music, you're probably not going to like this album. Though I do think he does a good job of balancing, like he has a couple songs, particularly the first two songs, After the Garden, Living with War, are not specific. Like, you know what he's talking about if you're familiar with, you know, this era of United States history. But at the same time, it could be about any time in which we're living in war, any time in which maybe your leaders are not telling you the truth. There's a song in here called Families, which is just kind of about soldiers and how they have families. That could be, you know, applied to any given era of war. There's another song that I really, really like, Oh, Restless Consumers, which is really just a universal cry for peace. And he drops examples of sort of war-torn areas around the world and how, you know, everybody just kind of wants to know the truth. We don't want the lies, that it's just live in peace. So even though there are a number of songs that, without mentioning Bush's name, are clearly about George W., there are a number of songs that grounded in 2006. There were also a number of songs that are universal, that are just like, could have been about the Vietnam War. And who knows, maybe he was thinking that when he wrote it. He lived through that. So who knows? There's a song about thinking about a friend that way back in the day, one of those nostalgic reminiscent songs in which he and his friend, or I don't know if it's Neil and a person or just the character singing the song, go to register for the draft. And then the last line is like, I'm remembering you because, you know, you gave your life for the country and I'm still here to remember you. So apparently the vibe of the song, which has this sort of nostalgic sort of sadness that lingers throughout. The song is toward the end. It's called Roger and Out. This sadness sort of lingers and you're not really sure why it's there. But then you find out maybe this person registered for the draft, got drafted and died. And then the singer of the song never went and survived. And so there's this weird emotion of that. So yeah, it's one of those albums that I think has an immediacy to it because of the rock energy, has an immediacy to it because of the lyrics, especially if in like 2006 you're against Bush and you're against the war and you're against, you know, the Patriot Act and things that are happening. But I still think it works today, and I think the little nuanced things, those universal songs kind of hold everything together as we're like, all right. And one of the songs, to be honest, Let's Impeach the President, which I liked much earlier. I liked much better 20 years ago. It's hard to revisit this song because there are actual snippets of George Bush speaking, saying some of his most ridiculous things. And every time I listen to this, I'm kind of surprised at sort of how I don't want to hear it. Like, I just don't want to hear that man's voice. We are living in a time in which George Bush is looked back on like as our sane like president, despite the things he was doing because of where we are now. So it's really weird to have listened to this week and be like, I don't want to hear these things anymore. Like, it's almost like triggering in a weird way, having lived through it in real time here. And I've always been politically active, and I'm one of those who protests, and I have my views, and I'm very outspoken about them. Elsewhere, not on this channel, other than this video. And so, yeah, it was weird. It's weird. That's the one song I'm like, I wish his voice wasn't on here, but we'll pin that for another video coming soon. But anyways, 10 songs, opens up with a song called After the Garden, which is kind of just your, you know, pretty straightforward, Crazy Horse sounding type rock song. We get both a Purple Haze and a Sunshine reference, both of which were strains, types of lysergic acid that were popular back in the day. So it's interesting that he's, you know, after the garden. How, I think it's something about how we won't need that anymore. We're not going to expand our minds, unfortunately. This is definitely more of a little metaphorical thing and not a specific thing to 2006. Really nice, cool little guitar section after the first chorus that has this really neat, almost proggy psych little section. It's not very long, but it's musically really compelling. The second song is the title track, Living with War. A little softer of a rock sound. We got these choral vocals. It's about living with war, but hoping for peace, hoping that I don't ever have to kill again. It's a really good compliment to the first song. He quotes the Star Spangled Banner in here. The third song, absolutely amazing. The Restless Consumer starts off with like Neil just kind of messing around with some chords, kind of like an intro to like, you know, like a hurricane if he would play it live, when he would just strum some stuff and then drop it and then but we get him kind of messing around. Then he drops the opening riff and then the drums come in. Just really lively, really good energy, really kind of has an attitude to it. There's the chorus would seem like don't need, and then Neil comes in with like all the list of things that we don't need. He's kind of like going on a rant, has a really like really grungy, active grungy side, like, you know, mid 90s type vibe. It's just a universal cry for peace, no more lies. Just opening song is fantastic. Second song complements the opening song, and then the third song just kind of like just increases the level, the quality level even more so. And then the fourth song is just absolutely just probably the best song on here. Has a very throw your hatred down off Mirrorball type vibe. It's just like this attack, very specific. There's very specific references to Bush, to post 9/11. We get everything from the Mission Accomplished banner to the trumpet that played taps automatically, so they didn't have to hire and pay people to do it because there were so many bodies coming in. Everything about this song is just fantastic. But all of those specific Bush references are also vague enough to kind of work if you're not familiar with the history and don't know what he's specifically referencing. The little breaks between the vocals are super ragged guitar-wise and just kind of it just absolutely, the vibe on this just feels so spontaneous and so raw. There's a trumpet solo that comes in. It seems like they ran through these songs 3 or 4 times, enough to know them, or like, okay, we know them, let's drop it, and like whatever, and leave all the rough edges. Fantastic performance. That's followed by something called Families, which is kind of a short, tighter, scrappier little rock song. This is about the human side of war. Soldiers are people too, people. Let's remember that. Then we get Flags, and we get the 2 sort of traditional protest songs. Flags of Freedom, which is sort of mining Dylan's Chimes of Freedom for its melody. There's an actual Dylan singing in 1963 reference. That is the actual lyric. Bob Dylan singing in 1963 reference. That's a line, not reference. That's not in there. Just Bob Dylan singing in 1963. It's by far the most predictable of the songs on here as far as like being folk music. And I think it was good that he dropped it in the middle of the album, because we kind of set up this alternative way of having protest music, Neil's version of it. And then we're still doing like this Crazy Horse meets Pearl Jam rock music, but it's in the middle of the album. And it's kind of like, oh, we finally got to this point. He's even specifically referencing Dylan. Neil knows what he's doing. He's very much aware of like what he's doing with the song, and, you know, it works. Then we get what is probably the centerpiece of the album, only because I think it got the most attention. Let's Impeach the President. Some really nice trumpet work in there. We get a Patriot Act reference, Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, Bush. We get some racism thrown in about Katrina. We get a reference to Bush owning the Texas Rangers. We're kind of referencing musically the city of New Orleans, as this is a song that's definitely dealing with also the post-Katrina nightmare and how Bush handled that. But this is the one where I'm like, I don't want to hear his voice. Please, we need a version which his voice is not there, right? Next song is Looking for a Leader. This is another one of the just fantastic songs on here that also kind of mines a little Mirrorball energy. Kind of reminds me of Big Green Country. Just that sort of melodic driving rock. We get an Obama. This is the one in which he predicts that maybe Obama will be our savior, or maybe Colin Powell. It's very catchy. It's melodic. It's hopeful. It's literally about looking for a leader that's going to take us out of this mess. Then we get just what Neil does so well, sort of this nostalgic vibe with this hint of sadness. Roger and Out opens up referencing about walking down that old hippie highway, thinking about you again, reminiscent. It's slower, it's melodic, it's nostalgia. Two friends going off to register. One of them apparently goes to war and doesn't come back. Yeah, it's just an absolutely amazing song. It's pretty much the last song because there's one more track, but it's just a choral version of America the Beautiful. Sounds absolutely great. Little gospel-y church energy seeping in. A lot of oohs to kind of close out the song. This album I just think is much, much better than it deserves to be. Like a week and a half to just do the entire thing and release it to the masses. One of the most spontaneous, it's up there with, I mean, it's not Ohio. Ohio is a perfect maybe protest song, but it just has that energy of like, we got to do it now. If we wait any amount of time, it loses its immediacy. And when the passion is that real and the motivation is that real, and you're able to both tap into the universal sort of values that will always be there, regardless of whether it's 2006 or whether it's the Vietnam War or whether it's some future war we're into, you're able to tap into those things, even when you're specifically dealing with a specific person in a specific time. It just, 19 years later, it kind of still holds up somehow. And the guitar playing is fantastic. The band, the band is fantastic. The use of the choir and the trumpet makes sense. Yeah, it's a really good album. I'm just always surprised at how much I enjoy it when I go back to it. And I think maybe the best part of the album is it's not front heavy, it's not back heavy. It's like you have a great song opening. I mean, you're just kind of like this roller coaster of like intensity, but it's just incredibly well sequenced and incredibly well done. I'm going to rank the songs. If I had to rank the songs, I have them like that. Turn on my list. So yeah, at the very top of it, you have shock and awe, another George Bush era term about how they were going to go in with shock and awe and the war would be over soon. It was not. The Restless Consumer, fantastic. Roger and Out, kind of sad. Looking for a leader, that sort of Big Green Country one. The Opening After the Garden, Families. Let's Impeach the President drops to 8 because of that hearing George's voice. It's still not something I'm comfortable with. After all these decades, after all these years, and America the Beautiful, for as beautiful as it is, it's still just America the Beautiful, sung by a choir. If I had to rank this album, it is not in the bottom half of the list. Here's the bottom, 18? Yeah, it's not in the bottom 18. Dead Man Soundtrack drops down to 21. So there we go. It is right there at number 17. It is the first album in quite a while that has been able to pass Trans and Reactor. Ever since we hit the 2000s, everything has been after that. But there are songs on both Trans and Reactor, and I think the concept of this and the boldness of this, I'm able to rank it higher than just those. Those are albums that have just, every time I listen to them, they get better and better, and I didn't think there would be anything that would be above them past 2000, but Living with War, I was really surprised at how much it just sounds fresh. It sounds raw. It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like a grumpy old man complaining about politics. There's an immediacy and a vibrancy to it that I still enjoy listening to, and it doesn't hurt that my politics are aligned with his politics, at least in this instance. That sort of 60s hippie aesthetic, morality, worldview, love your brother, love your sister, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Living with War. All right, let me know your thoughts on this album, what you think, what you like, what you don't like, what I messed up on. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Do all of those things, people. And we got another version of this album coming up in a couple days, so you want to check that out. But anyways, thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.